The project has had quite a long gestation period, really. I worked in London in the early 2000s on Fleet Street and worked next door to an organisation called the St Bride Foundation, and the foundation was set up as an educational and social venue for the printing and newspaper trades around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And Fleet Street was, of course, where all the press and the newspapers and the printing trades were clustered at the time. And I was working there in the early 2000s, right next door to the foundation, and was going there for some life drawing classes that my employer had arranged. And I'd heard about this swimming pool in the basement that used to be in the basement, and it had been boarded over since the 1960s, and it had this reputation for being very unclean. The water was filthy and green, and I imagined or assumed that this murkiness was caused by ink washing off the printer's hands and entering the water. And I'm very interested in the idea of the edit, which is something that's common to both publishing and moving image. So yeah, there's three things: the washing, the newspaper, and the edit together. Just working with these things helped me find what the final form of the work was, sort of get closer to that. That it wasn't about so much capturing a likeness of the real space itself. It was getting closer to this kind of more social or psychological space of the pool. I wanted to make a re-edit of a newspaper for the worker bathers of, swimming in this pool. So the large work is, for me, a very liquid new newspaper for them. So the show's called Weekend, and I'm interested in these periods between, intervals outside of work that are maybe defined against work. And so this newspaper, I wanted to be a bit like a weekend edition, something that's open to other possibilities. It comes from the collages. I make the collages first and then film them on 16mm, and something about the translation between the two media, and then it gets digitized as well. So it goes through all these different processes, and something about translating between those processes sort of lets other information in and excludes other information. So it becomes a little bit more liquid in a way. So we enter the show via the shallow end of the pool. This is one part of a two-part sculpture called Spill. It's sort of modelled on an overflow channel of that you might find running around the perimeter of a swimming pool. When bodies enter a swimming pool, the water gets displaced and it flows out through that lip. This marks the water level of at the shallow end of the St Bride pool, and it's got a companion across the exit of the gallery, which is at the deep end. I was interested in the brass because it has these antimicrobial properties, so it's been thought of as self-cleaning, and it's often used in public architecture for that reason. This is called Stepped. It's modelled on a local pool, actually, the stepped entrance to a local pool near where I live in the Bay of Plenty. It's a concrete sort of sculptural seated form, and I hope that people can use it as a literal place of rest in the show to view the work. The collages are called Edit, and I'm wanting them to be a bit more of an atmosphere somehow. Rather than specifically indexing the news of the day, they become more about a record of the materials used to create them. So you learn weird things about the materials of the newspaper, like how much magenta gets used on a page, or how, you know, what certain colours are made up of, and so it becomes more about the mineral of the ink rather than the linguistic content or the specific pictorial content. I wanted to make a work which was quite concentrated and inky. I wanted to make a work that was like highly saturated and felt quite inky. It's another collage like the large work, but it involves some different processes to give it that sort of more intense coloration. I've worked with 16mm quite often, and sometimes I project it and sometimes I transfer it into digital files, but this is actually the first time I've worked with it as a 2-channel, which I often work digitally into multiple channels, so it's pretty special to see how that's come together. Yeah, and the rear projection just gives it such a vibrancy, which is really beautiful. Yeah.